G'day, I'm Tim Thompson. Timber fence posts are still really popular and widely used. What if I told you that there was a native Australian option that was not chemically treated and is fully sustainable? Let's have a look at Forest Plantations. I'm here today with James. James, how are you, mate?
I'm good, mate. Good to meet you, Tim.
You've got a fascinating business here that's truly circular and is actually building soil.
True.
And is intraspecies.
Yes, it is. We have 6 to 8 different eucalypt species that we grow.
Yep.
From durability 1 to durability 2. And we've been experimenting with this since 2000.
Yep.
And we've adapted and changed it as we've gone along, with some successes and some less successful as we've been going.
Well, I can't wait to find out all about this. So let's start out with the posts and then get our hands dirty and go out into the plantations and find out what's happening. And don't forget, if you like content like this, hit the little subscribe button down there, give it a thumbs up, and there's plenty more content like this and more on timthompson.ag.
So these posts here are what we're calling a thinning product. So we're basically taking these out of the forest to, when we're thinning the trees, when they're thick, we might take out those two, and then the other two trees have a gap to grow into. So basically what we're trying to do here is make a product out of our thinning, which we hadn't had before.
So what would have been waste is now perfect round fence posts, the rot and fire resistant.
Exactly. And that was that's what we've been developing over the last 2.5 years.
Now you've come up with a machine to peel the cambium layer off these posts.
Yes.
And prevent rot on the outside of the posts, making them perfectly ideal for fence posts.
Yes.
Can you talk us through a little bit about how that machine works?
It's called a chuckless lathe, and it's basically like a giant pencil sharpener, and it's got rollers in it, and it rolls the log onto the blade, and the peelings come off, and then the log comes out the other side. We're peeling the sap off the log. So the aim of the exercise is to take the sap off, which will rot away and make the post unstable. And so therefore, by removing the sap, also you're removing the post moving in the ground once it's rotted away, and you're getting down to the heartwood.
So James, you're not only running multi-species in your plantations, you're running different types of timber, but you're also running animals with your crop as well, and that's instrumental to helping you build soil carbon and keep your weeds down?
Yeah, that's correct. So we run on this property at Dunrobin here at Sextonville. We run white Brahmins.
Yep.
And we put an Angus bull across them, and we throw Brangus cattle, and we sell the steers, and we keep the pick out of the heifers.
Yep.
And we use those heifers in our replacement program.
So you've got a self-replacing program. You mainly sell to the Vila market, is that correct?
Yeah, in this area it's a Vila market, so we sell them off at 6 to 12 months old. Yep. Depending on their weight, normally sort of 300 to 400 kilo.
Okay. And what's the critical significance of having the cattle running underneath your plantations? Is it just for extra cash flow, or is it doing something else?
They're lowering our fuel loads in the plantation, and because they're Brahmins, they also hunt around and they eat a lot of woody weeds as well. So they're dropping our fuel load down as well, and we hold them on a little bit longer, whereas most people will be moving the cattle from eating the top off the paddock and then moving it to the next one, sort of cell grazing type. So we're sort of holding them on longer, so they hunt around, drop our fuel loads, and then moving them on. So there's a relationship between the cattle and the timber. And in this area, there's two products that are really here. It's timber and it's beef. So we're working. We're not creating a sunrise industry. We're working within what exists.
Yes.
So, there's mills here we can take the timber to once it's of age to be harvested. Yeah, and we can turn our cattle off at Casino Market or Lismore Market if we need to.
So, James, these posts here are about to go into that peeling process that we just saw there.
Yes.
And once they've gone through the peeler, they come out as basically perfect rounds.
Correct.
But you've had to develop some racking and so on to sort them.
Yeah, so after they go through the peeler, they go to a sorting table on the back. Yep. And when they go onto the sorting table, we pull them off, we put them into these cradles. Yep. And the cradles are for each size. because as it's peeling, the logs are all in different sizes as they're coming through.
Yes.
So we have to do the sort at the back end on the sorting table. And we put these in these, we strap them up, and then we take them out and we put them on the pad for storage.
And what sizes do you have? What diameters do you have?
We have 100,
Yep.
120, 150, 175, and 200s and 220s.
Right.
So
there's some thumpers there.
Yeah, so when you think about it, it's the bottom of the tree, it's the middle of the tree, it's the top of the tree, and it's the top of the tree. So basically, they're coming from the thinning, the thinning process. So we're growing the trees, and we have to create space for them, so we have to take the trees out. And
so in plantations, a lot of thinning occurs?
yes, it should. That's for best practice.
Okay. So pine
does. They do an outrow. Pine does an outrow.
Yep.
And in hardwood plantations, to get, if you're growing durable timber,
yes,
you would thin. So we thin to waste at about year 0 to 5, and then we thin to waste again at years 8 to 10 to maybe 12, and then this is our thinning product at years 15 to 20.
So this would have been waste, but coming up with this peeling process, you've now managed to make a good saleable product.
We would have looked
would have been waste.
Excuse me. Yeah, we would have thinned this to waste. Exactly,
Yeah.
Tim. We would have thinned this to waste, and which is all going back into the soil. But now we're trying to make a product out of it. So we went to a veneer mill, and we saw the rounder in front of the veneer mill rounding the logs to then to go through the veneer process.
Now, that's not only critical to the perfect round. Like, I can run my hand up and down this and not get a splinter, which is a huge advantage over a lot of timber posts that you use in fencing. But it also increases the durability of the product, doesn't it?
Yes, because you're taking the sap off. So there would have been sap on either side, about say so high. It would have been, so I'd say that's a 175. So that would have been about a 220 to 200 log, and it's taken off sort of, I suppose, 4 to 6 centimetres on the diameter, or half that for either side. Excuse me. But yeah, basically you're peeling the sap off, because when you have a traditional log, natural log in the ground, the sap rots off and it wobbles. So what we're doing here is we're removing that. And so that's all durable timber all the way through there, and then you've got the pith in the middle.
Now, you've got multiple species here.
Correct.
So can you just take us through a few of the species that you're milling at the moment?
So this is white mahogany, which is a poorly named because it's not a mahogany, it's a very durable eucalypt. It's known locally as yellow stringy, or Achomoides by the scientific name.
Right.
And what this tree is extremely durable, it's extremely hard, it's heavy, and it's been used as a fencing product traditionally in the North Coast and is preferred.
So a lot of people would know this as a split post.
Correct.
In the paddock with holes drilled through it, with the wire running through it. It's been there for 100 years.
Yes,
proven
correct.
product.
And this particular species is meant to have some fire resistance capabilities.
Okay.
So people prefer to use that than a lot of other timbers. Whereas this timber here, this is Gympie Messmate, which is from Queensland in Gympie, and it's our best performing plantation tree, and it's durability 1, it's durability 1 2, so that's got an in-ground use.
Now, the peelings, that's a fair bit of waste there, but you're turning that into another resource.
Yeah, so we're going to make compost out of it, and that's our next endeavour.
So, James, what a lot of people don't get with the timber industry is that there's remarkably little waste. Most timber mills actually use all of these offcuts for something, don't they?
Yeah, it'll go to chicken bedding, pet bedding, it'll go into making compost like we're doing. So this is already an established industry on the North Coast. People are already doing this. So and it can go for potting mix. It can go to the macadamia industry. So our plan with this is to add cow manure from a feedlot and then mix that in, and then to create soil. Basically, what we're trying to do is get the biological activity in there, the fungi, the bacteria and stuff like that, and then create those soils. And if we can't sell it, we can use it for on-farm use, which is only improving our own pastures anyway.
So the timber industry really is, you talk about renewable industries, you talk about circular economies and all of that sort of thing.
Sure.
When you're looking at a well-established industry that actually returns its waste to build more soil, You can't
Sure.
get more circular than that, can
Well,
you?
it's happening in the forest every day. Every little branch that falls is rotting it down and becoming soil. The timber we're growing in our plantations will have a, let's say, 30, 40-year rotation. Yeah.
Yep.
A piece of coal, I don't know. I think it must be 2 million years to make. So
That's a fair rotation, isn't it?
You know, in the end, it truly is sustainable, and I think people need to try to have an open mind and understand that it's also a habitat. If it's eucalypts, you know, over pine, although pine still has its place, it's also homes for everything as well. And that vegetated space is literally what's saved our biodiversity, ironically. Yeah.
Well, I can't wait to get out into the plantation and see what you're doing biodiversity-wise.
Sure.
So, are we able to see maybe one of your newer plantations and one of your older established plantations, and find out about the interesting things that you're doing to manage these differently, and how it's impacting on soil health?
Sure. So we've got a plantation age here. It was planted in 2014, so that means it's 12 years old.
Yep.
And then we'll go to the next place, which was planted in 2002, so that means it's 20 years old.
Now, the story here at Forest Plantations is not a simple one of just simply growing trees. They're also using cattle in an innovative way, and this is changing the way that they're managing the cattle. To talk about that, I'm going to introduce Trevor, who's the livestock manager here, and he's a very experienced operator, and he's learning a lot about managing cattle to manage plantations. Trevor, how are you, mate?
How are you, Tim?
Mate, it's fantastic to be out here with you. Thank you very much for your time. I think you've got a lot to teach us about what's going on here. To start off with, what size property are we standing on at the moment?
It's just over 1,000 acres on this place. I don't know exactly how many trees we're running, but we're running about 200 head of cattle, just over 200 white Brahman cows at the moment.
And what percentage pasture to forestry plantation would you have on the property?
It'd be probably 60 to 40 trees to...
So 60%'s trees and plantation, 40%'s grass.
Yep.
And you're running 200 head?
Yep. We did run 300 when we originally bought the place.
Yep.
But with the plantation, we've just reduced it down to turn off better sort of quality cattle.
So one of the big things that you've learnt through this process is to change breeds to get the outcomes that you want. You're running Brahman?
Yeah, we're running white Brahmans. They just have a better foraging ability in the trees, reducing the weeds, reducing the fire risk, just what we save on actually putting machinery in there to keep it clean, making some real good cattle out of it.
Because you're then also introducing Herefords into this as well?
Yeah, our first calf heifers are all with Angus bulls, so we get a Brangus calf out of them, and then they put a Hereford bull over them to get the F1s, which are really good calves that we sell through the local market. Your Brahmans range from $5 a kilo a calf up to your Brangus, and your F1s are getting $6.50 to $7.50 a kilo. So there is a good incentive to do it.
So you're making money off an animal that you're using to manage the land. Now you've noticed a few things happening when you graze in the coops as well.
We're mainly running the dry cattle in the plantation.
Yep.
And then now
you bring them out onto the improved pasture to
once they calve
to produce.
Yeah. Our biggest problem is fertility with all Bos Indicus.
Yep.
But we're getting that culling rate down to what we think is presentable.
Now you also adjust your stocking rate on each property, because you've got several properties here, you've not just got the one property, and you actually move cattle according to the growth of the plantations, is that correct?
Yeah, we have 13 properties in total.
Yep.
They range from Nimbin right through to Benalbo. They're all at different stages, so as the trees are getting bigger, there's less light, there's less grass.
So you reduce your stocking rate,
So
and
we've got to
move those animals
reduce
somewhere else.
Reduce our stocking rate onto other properties, which have smaller trees, which the less light, more light getting into the trees, so there's more feed for the cattle.
Now you've noticed something interesting too, because you're a very observant gentleman, the way that you manage your cattle. You've noticed something happening with the pasture, if you like to call it that, underneath the trees after grazing. Are you finding that the grazing is actually improving the fertility?
Yeah, we're using different grasses under the trees, which is a broadleaf paspalum.
Yeah.
There's a couple of legumes that we put around just to try to get them growing as well, but the broadleaf paspalums really increase productivity under the trees.
So you're seeding and managing the pasture under the trees as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, which is something that I suppose in a lot of coops, if there's grass, they get rid of it because it's a weed and it's taking nutrients away from the tree. But you're finding the opposite. You're finding that by planting the right trees, you've increased your stocking rate in the coops.
Yeah, our place at Nimbin that we've had there for, it was the first property that they bought. We put broadleaf paspalum on that, and we had about 25 steers on there when we first did it, and we're up to 40 cows and calves that we run there at the moment, just with the broadleaf paspalum, which is improving all the time, less weeds and more grass.
So that's a big message to get out of this, is that grazing actually helps improve the fertility, and it actually helps increase the productivity of a property when it's managed correctly. But that's the secret, isn't it? Is it's managing it correctly.
Yeah, having the right weed control and the stocking rates for each property.
What's really refreshing about this, and what I love talking about with you, is that you are a cattleman. You're a very, very experienced cattleman. You've had your own properties, you've managed other properties. But you're not taking the usual line that cattlemen have, which is, I grow grass. You're a landscape manager, and you're using the cattle as a tool to manage the whole landscape and the whole enterprise.
Yeah, it's just a different way of looking at how you actually manage the land.
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to, because we're using the cattle to look after the trees.
And I think we're going to go into one of the coops now, and we're going to have a look at an example of how well you're actually building topsoil.
Yep.
That's quite a remarkable story, Trevor.
Thank you.
So Trevor, you're actually managing the understory of the coops as a pasture as well, and you're managing a transition of the plants in the understory. Can you tell us a little bit about the grass to your right?
This is blady grass. It's very common around this area, very low in protein. The cattle do very poorly on it. There is a very high fire risk, because anything over that height and the cattle won't touch it, so it gets thicker and thicker, and then fire will come through. So we're trying to replace it with this low light variety of broadleaf paspalum, and it's doing a very good job. As you can see, it's right up close to the trees, and cattle love it.
And you've got 100% ground cover, which is a really critical thing too, because you're in a high rainfall area.
Yeah.
And you don't want to have erosion and things like that. So it's really critical that you cover the ground and you make 100% productivity out of the soil.
Yeah.
Now, you haven't gone through fancy means. I did a little bit of a regen on my paddocks, or I've started a little bit of a regen on my paddocks recently, and people have had a go at me because I just spread seed with a spreader. But that's exactly what you do here.
Yeah, we've just been running around with a little fertiliser spreader on the back of a quad, just throwing the seed out.
And it's working fine.
It's working.
Yeah. So there you go, guys. You don't have to be highly technical if you want to get new species growing in your location. Just manage your grazing really well and use low-tech means, and eventually you'll get there.
Yeah.
This plantation was planted in 2014. There's 8 different tree species in here. This one here is an ironbark. This one here is a brae gum. This one here is a brush box. Come over here. This one here is red mahogany. And what else we got here? Yeah, here's a tallow wood. These trees have been pruned to about 3 metres on their first lift, and they've gone through and we've thinned out to waste all the trees that will never be merchantable. So these trees are 12 years old.
So with that little bit of a walkthrough, James, you're not just growing one species of tree in these coops, you're growing multitudes of different trees. Is there an advantage in doing that?
We're trying to capture the site better. So what we found was when we had single stand compartments, that areas would fail or wouldn't go as well. And then we started trialling out mixes just to see what would happen as an experiment. And then we noticed that the trees would pick up where the other ones failed. So it's like insurance. So we're basically putting the mix in, and then when we go through and thin the trees, whatever makes it, and whatever doesn't. Sometimes you may have to consider a tree that grows slower but has good wood quality, like an ironbark. So you may try to favour it in some spots. But you know, it's quite a complicated process to select which trees to keep and not. And so there's a whole science and learning curve around that.
And I suppose you're also, by growing multiple species, you know, if a pest likes one type of tree, it's going to be held in check by an insect that might grow on another tree. You'll have different fungal mycorrhizae that prefer different root systems. So you're increasing biodiversity. So you're potentially lowering the pest threshold as well, aren't you?
Yeah, and we've seen that. So we've had single stand trees and mixes, and then a pest came through, and I think it was the tallow woods, and it hit the tallow woods. And where we had the trees that were mixed, they still hit the tallow woods, but not as hard, because they couldn't just jump to the next tree and keep eating. So if they still, but in the end, it actually didn't affect their forming either, because eucalypts are pretty hardy and they're growing where they're meant to, which is, you know,
which is another good thing.
Yeah, they're not an
native
introduced species or anything like that, and that's why they are pretty hardy and they go pretty well. But I think also the different flowering times, you're getting all those different interactions happening all the time when you have a multiple.
You don't have booms and busts.
To be quite honest, it's more interesting. You know what I mean? Like, we could probably choose just to grow one tree, which would be the Chloesiana, which is our best. And I predict that will be the future. What if people do commercial hardwood in the future? And
that's your hot tip.
That's what will happen. Yeah, because it's outperforming everything else. But at the same time, by having the mixes, you've also got unique timbers. We're growing timbers that no one else is growing in plantation, like the brush box, the ironbark.
So your biodiversity is giving you a market advantage.
Oh, for sure it is. And the main reason we do grow the biodiversity is to cover the spaces where the trees fail. Not necessarily, that was the motivation.
In this way, economics have informed your land management and improved your land management because you've looked at covering gaps, which is what nature does so well.
Yeah, exactly. So trying to capture the site better is really what we've achieved by having the mixes rather than having a single stand across the whole tree. There is more complication when you go to harvest, when you go to process that timber, you don't have a one line, but really we're going to be small niche, so we're hoping that in the future that we'll be able to have timber that you can't get anywhere else, you know. Unfortunately, sadly, not many people grow durable eucalypts in Australia. You've got to go to Africa, South Africa, you know.
And import our own timber.
Yeah. Well, Australia imports, I can't remember the exact figure, it's either 60 or 70% of our timber. Yeah. You know, from unregulated forestry.
There you go.
So, you know, and people complain about our highly regulated forestry.
So at least by growing it here and growing it well, you're not only improving the land and you're stopping erosion and you're increasing biodiversity, it's a truly circular product and you're capturing carbon.
Yes, that's hope. My hope beyond my lifetime was that we do 3 rotations in these mixes, and I think by the 3rd rotation you'll know how to do it. At the moment we're still guessing, we're still trying to work it out, we're still trying to learn, we're trying to work it out. But I think after 3 rotations, so that'd be 90 to 120 years, I think if people did carry it forward, I'm not sure what will happen in the future, but that's what I hope would happen. Yeah, that's my dream, is that people crack the nut that we're trying to work out, try to solve this problem, try to solve how to grow the timber in the mixes to get the best result for the triple bottom line.
Beautiful. Now, you've got a standard timber that's close to full rotation over in Nimbin now.
Sure.
And you've been building soil with a similar strategy of management over there. Can we go and have a look at that?
Absolutely, let's do it.
Fantastic. What an amazing office, mate.
Absolutely.
It's just incredible. Can you tell me just a little bit about this geography that we're in now at Nimbin?
We're at Lillian Rock at Nimbin. There's Lillian Rock there, it's a volcanic plug. And then if you look further up, you've got the western side of the caldera of Mount Warning, and you've got the pinnacle, the bluff, and on the other side of that hill is Sphinx Rock. It's high rainfall, high fertility, high weed growth. It's a beautiful spot and a beautiful area.
So where we are now in Nimbin,
Yes.
we've got behind us a stand of ironbark here.
Correct.
Now, you planted, this was one of the first plantings you did, first or second planting you did?
second planting we did in 2002.
And it's a monoculture of ironbark.
Correct.
So this is before you started getting into your multi-species and you had a go at that.
Yep. So actually, this we call it single stand because
Yep.
next to the when you have single stands and they're mixed within the landscape, it's pretty diverse anyway. To be fair.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like a
and-
patchwork quilt,
yeah,
as it were.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. So, but we over in another area we tried out the 3 species.
Yes.
And we mixed them in together, and that was when these went in as well. And then we noticed that they picked up areas that other areas failed.
So that's where you made your discoveries, right here.
Yeah, and then the next planting we did 4-way mixes.
Yep.
Yeah, and then we looked at that and saw how they behaved, and then we sort of went from there. And now we just do 6 to 8-way mixes everywhere. And the main reason is that you can thin out what doesn't work.
Yep.
And all the trees that we're growing, we've taken some species out.
Yep.
You know, will produce timber.
Now, the understory underneath these trees looks like a manicured lawn.
Yes. Yes.
You had a lot of trouble with lantana at the beginning. You have to poison lantana. Anyone
Yeah.
who knows about lantana will know that chemical is really the only way to go.
Yeah. Yes.
But once you've got the lantana under control,
Sure.
and you use physical means of mulching as well, the cattle grazing under here are pretty much keeping the area under control with a small amount of spot spraying.
Yes. We're close to the coast here compared to the other properties.
Yep.
So therefore there's a higher rainfall. So there's probably more weed management here than
Yes.
say out at Benalbo, which is
Yeah.
is a 2-hour drive from here.
Yeah.
So sort of to be balanced about it, I say that's the case. But yeah, it's basically we ran the mulcher through to get access to get the hoses in.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the lantana was literally over your head all the way through.
And now we've got a whole heap of broadleaf paspalum
Correct.
and other species that are useful grazing plants.
Yes.
And your cattle are in here at the moment browsing,
Correct. So like
and you're building soil.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's the really interesting story is that when we first did our A horizons, they came out about 4 to 6 centimetres, and now I think they're down to about 15 to 20 centimetres.
Can we go and have a look at that?
Absolutely.
Let's go and look at soil. I love soil. Let's go and have a look at it.
That's it there. He's hitting that clay there. Can you see that clay?
So James, this is just a random spot in one of your little plantings here. What's the majority tree around here?
We've got grey gum and we've got tallow wood.
Okay, so
Yeah.
this is a dual tree little spot here.
Yeah, this is where we did a little mix. Actually, by accident, they gave us the wrong trees. That's another story. So
Yep.
I'm saying about 9 centimetres there. You seeing that?
I am, yeah, and we
Yeah.
can certainly see that there's lighter clay down below,
Oh yeah.
and we've certainly got a lot of evidence of organic materials in here. And some of the PEDs that this is forming have a lot of roots in them and a lot of wormholes and various other things in them. There's a lot of activity in this soil. That's something that I find really interesting with some of your practices. is that when you harvest the trees, you leave the root systems behind.
Correct. Yeah,
so
yeah,
you're leaving virtually half the tree in the ground to then rot into the ground.
Yes.
Provide carbon to the soil.
Yes.
As the roots rot, there's all these routes for water and microbes to get further down into the soil, and you're actually breaking up the soil and making it more friable and adding structure to the subsoil as well, aren't you?
Yes, and we sort of learnt that after the fact, if I'm really honest about it.
Yeah, yeah.
But as we well, you know, I don't come from a soil background, but you know, obviously, we originally wanted to remove the stumps, but if the cost of doing that's prohibitive.
Prohibitive.
Yeah. So we don't do that, but it is a plus, and also all the fine. The trees themselves drop all the little branches, they drop all the dead leaves, so it's constantly adding to the soil.
So you've got a humic layer over the top as well.
Yeah. And we all our and also you've got the grass layer too there. So being a high rainfall area, as you were saying before, I think it's really important.
100% coverage of the soil, critical. And this is about to be grazed again. It's due for another graze very soon.
Yep, the cattle have actually just been put in here.
Yep.
Literally on Friday.
Okay, so this will now get eaten down and will turn into sort of more of the parkland that we saw in the last place.
Correct.
And then they get moved off again.
Yes, so we've got 3 different places to move them here. Yep.
Fantastic.
So this is an example of the broadleaf paspalum sprouting through the cow poo. And the cows go and deposit this all over our block and the grass spreads. So we only really need to establish it in an area, and when it's in seed for the cattle to eat it, and then they'll spread it.
Well, James, you not only grow the trees, but you also try them out. Here are some of your fence posts in action.
Yes.
And what a wonderful way to finish off the video, looking back across at your managed grazing lands. You've got your forestry plantations at the back of you and the beautiful hills of Nimbin.
Yep.
Mate, thank you so much for taking the time to take us through what you do and showing us an example of a holistic environmental management in a truly commercial operation. So well done, mate. You're carrying the triple bottom line and you're doing all the right things.
Yeah, I'd like to also just say that it's my brother Mark and my sister Wendy, and that we established this all together, and I've have really good staff that's made it happen. There's no way that we could run 3,200 hectares on our own and have 800 hectares of plantation in, and also accomplish what we all have accomplished together. But I'd like to say, Tim, thanks for taking an interest in what we're doing.
It's the future, mate.
It's an absolute pleasure meeting you.
Good on you, mate.
Thank you.
It's the future. Guys, if you like this kind of video, don't forget, hit the little subscribe button, give it a thumbs up, and there's plenty more content like this and more on timthompson.ag. And if you want some really good quality, perfect round hardwood timber fence posts, get on to Forest Plantations, because I reckon they've got a couple they can sell you.